In this video, let's talk about Andy Reid surprisingly telling the media today the Chiefs could roll with 7 wide receivers, the Chiefs actually signing a former XFL receiver today, the battle for the backup QB spot, and much freaking more. But first, how about those? First up, practice today was so hot, they actually moved indoors to their indoor facility that doesn't have AC, so I don't know how much it actually helped. And players were saying that today's indoor practice was harder than any camp practice they had at training camp. There was no breeze, and it was just an extremely hot and humid day. But hey, welcome to the Midwest. Offensive tackle Donovan Smith said, "This heat today got Tampa beat, and because the Midwest humidity is nothing to play around with." Anyway, it was a good practice with a limited media look that did reveal running back Isaiah Pacheco to no longer be out there in a yellow "do not touch me" jersey. And Andy Reid said he could potentially play against Cleveland if he fully gets cleared by then. My guess is, though, he doesn't play as they keep him safe for a few weeks longer before the start of the regular season, or if he does play, it's a very, very small sample size just to get him out there and used to game speed, again, before the start of the season. And then Big Red shared the injury report is still the same, aside from the addition of defensive end Matt Dickerson, who sustained a turf toe injury of sorts during Week 2's preseason game. He also gave some clarity on defensive tackle Turk Wharton and why he's been held back from practice recently. I guess his knee swelled up a little bit, but coach said he's feeling good now, so maybe we see him back out there again at practice soon. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, here's what the rest of that injury report currently looks like. Defensive back Najee Johnson tore his ACL and is out for the season on IR. I won't talk about him all the time, but tight end Jody Fortson is also out for the season on IR due to having a recent successful shoulder surgery that he shared about on Instagram. And speaking of surgeries, Kadarius Toney is still out recovering from that knee surgery he had. And when Andy Reid asked if Toney would return to practice soon, he said, we'll see. Probably not tomorrow, which means it's probably going to be a little while. Well, something I hope isn't going to be a while is Chris Jones and his return to the team. He's still not around as he holds out during contract negotiations on a hopeful new deal. And no, there's no real update here other than hopefully something gets figured out and a deal gets done soon, or he just freaking returns as both sides are not even close to an agreement. And then Chris Jones is back for the regular season. Reports have it, though, he could hold out through part of September. So I hope to God we do not miss a couple weeks of Chris Jones and then obviously won't have Charles Omenihu for the first 6 weeks as well. Please don't let that happen. Anyway, next up, offensive lineman Nick Allegretti is still nursing a shoulder injury of sorts after leaving practice early last week. Cornerback Nick Jones is out with a couple of fractured fingers from Week 1's preseason game. Wide receiver Nico Remigio dislocated his shoulder last week at camp and is still out with no real update on him so far. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is still out resting that knee that keeps flaring up. I did a video covering that much more in depth in my concerns with Sneed's knee. You can see that up here if you want to check that out. Though it was noted that Sneed was indeed at practice, just there without a helmet on. And speaking of injuries, rookie defensive end Felix Anudike-Uzomah missed out on a lot of OTAs as well as rookie minicamp due to recovering from thumb surgery. And I think he had like a hamstring issue of sorts. He's not injured now, so I'll bring some clarity, but he's been getting a ton of preseason reps in as a way to get caught up as he can because of all the time that he missed. Felix spoke today to the media and said he trusts the coaches and the process, but admits that he still has a lot of work to do. Quote, "Still a lot of improvement I need to do to be a pretty good rusher, so the last 2 games were definitely something I needed. Developmental wise, he's still got a ways to go." This is per his words, but it's been great to get out there and play against real NFL opponents. He also noted that it'll be special for him as a KC kid to take the field at Arrowhead for the first time. However, he's here to put his head down and work to get ready for Detroit. September 7th, Week 1, let's freaking go. And then, this is a bit odd, but the Chiefs actually waived wide receiver Kekoa Crawford today with an injury designation, and if he clears waivers, he'll revert to IR, and then he can reach an injury settlement with the team, which is what the Chiefs did recently with cornerback Anthony Witherstone. The weird thing about Crawford, though, is he had a pretty nice showing preseason game 1 against the Saints, but then missed the last 2 days of training camp and didn't play in Sunday's game against the Cardinals, and Andy Reid did not mention him at all in today's presser. So this man mysteriously vanished. He just said the injury report is the same, even though there was never an announcement of any kind that Crawford was indeed injured. With all that being said, Crawford, we have no idea what's going on with him, but he's out, and a former XFL standout in Juwan Green is now in. The Chiefs signed him today after Crawford was waived. Juwan was a UDFA following the 2020 NFL Draft, signing with the Falcons to their practice squad, which is where he spent the entire year. After that, though, he had a couple of very short stints with the Lions and Titans, and ended up signing with the Seattle Sea Dragons of the XFL in 2022, where he racked up 29 receptions for 420. 420? yards and 6 touchdowns. And while I'm not sure he's more than a depth piece for the 90-man roster at the moment, the Chiefs may be trying to stack up some quality depth here to see what they may have before cutdowns, because some of these guys like Amir Smith-Marset, Cornell Powell, and maybe a couple others, but they're having a very positive preseason so far and may not clear waivers and land on the Chiefs practice squad like they would want them to. Anyway, Andy Reid then touched on a couple of other interesting things in his presser today. He was asked about the QB battle between Shane Buechele and Blaine Gabbert, saying they are real close and are competing. Quote, "Let's just let it play out here and see how it goes. It's good competition." And while I think Andy Reid ends up rolling with Blaine Gabbert as QB2 as the old trusty vet, much like Chase Daniel, Matt Moore, and Chad Henne were, I do think Gabbert also played really well in last week's game, much better than week 1. I understand Buechele did too, but I still have Gabbert as QB2 currently, with Buechele as the third option. Honestly, just let this man cook, slow cook rather, for one more year, and I think Shane Buechele is QB2. That's just kind of my feeling as the way things are right now. Andy Reid then mentioned that they are willing to keep 6 or 7 wide receivers, but didn't budge when asked about who those receivers fighting to make the bottom of the depth chart might be. He said, quote, "That 6 and 7 spot is going to be a pretty good battle, but it's open. It's wide open for those spots." And that's pretty wild that Big Red would actually say this to the media at today's presser, in my opinion, because the Chiefs have never rolled with 7 wide receivers on the initial 53-man roster since Andy has been a head coach. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's how many I have the Chiefs rolling with currently, especially with Kadarius Toney's injury, with those receivers being Kadarius Toney, MVS, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, Richie James, Justin Watson, and Justin Ross, in no particular order. Please don't stone me in the comments over that, but it was still interesting to hear Big Red say that out loud. The Chiefs are going to roll with 6 or 7 wide receivers. And with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below if you think the Chiefs are going to roll with 6 or with 7 and why. And speaking of receivers, one who is definitely making it is Rashee Rice, who balled all the way out in last Saturday's game, catching 8 passes for 96 yards after a tough drop early. However, the vets around him encouraged Rice that his best was still to come in that game, so don't get caught up on the drop. And they were right. Rice said he now feels really comfortable with the playbook, but you can never know the playbook too much with Coach Reid, because the more positions you know on the field, the more you'll be out there on the field to actually play. So he's just learning every area of it that he can. Also, Mahomes recently said Rashee Rice reminds him of Sammy Watkins in the way they can use him in the offense. And when the media asked Rashee Rice his thoughts on Patrick's comparison and whether or not he agreed with that assessment, he basically said, if Mahomes said it, then yep, I agree. DeAndre Hopkins is actually the receiver Rashee used to model his game after, who is his favorite wide receiver for a long time. But Rice said now that he's in the league, he's not focused on modeling his game after a particular receiver. He just wants to work on himself to see what he himself can become. And I will say, based on how he looked in this last game, I'm excited to see what's next for the rookie. And with all that being said, the question I have for you guys, are you excited about Rashee Rice this year as well? And could he be one of only a handful of rookie receivers in Andy Reid's system to get over 550 yards their rookie year? Or would you take the under? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those